So for this week, we're going to be covering Latin America. I'm also going to be going over post-colonial Africa. So you'll have more lectures this week than you did last week, but yeah. So anyhow, the assignment will still be only having to write 5 points from just 5 of the lectures that I do. Okay. But of course, you are supposed to be watching all of them. All right. So I talk about Latin America under the shadow of the U.S. empire, and maybe that's a controversial statement. It's not controversial for many people in Latin America. It's a controversial statement for those of us in the U.S. Here we're going to learn a lot. If you see the videos on General Augusto Pinochet, or Pinochet as he's often his name is pronounced, we'll just learn a lot about certain aspects of Latin America and the U.S. So the Monroe Doctrine, basically going back to 1823, the U.S. established this concept that the Western Hemisphere would be our sphere of influence, that Europe wouldn't be able to kind of engage in our affairs over here. So not just like with us, but with this side of the block, so to speak. And all nations kind of talk about their sphere of influence. Russia has always viewed particular areas to be their sphere of influence. China has their spheres of influence. But that only is significant if you have the power to enforce it, right? It's kind of like if I say, if a gang says this block is our block, it's only their block if they can hold on to the block, right? When the U.S. when the Monroe Doctrine was put forth, the idea in 1823, the U.S. didn't really have the ability to kind of enforce what it now certainly has had much more abilities to do so. Okay, and so that Monroe Doctrine has been used for dealing with places like Cuba, but let's talk about Cuba for a little bit. And the Platt Amendment of 1901. Secretary of War, United States, Elihu Root, drafted the set of articles, and Senator Orville Platt of Connecticut presented it. And it basically required the government of Cuba the right of the United States to intervene in Cuban affairs. So, to clarify, the United States then claimed that they have a right to intervene in Cuba. Guantanamo Bay is essentially ours as now. I mean, Guantanamo Bay is Cuba, but the United States dominates it. One of my professors told me that when Fidel in Cuba was questioned about torture in Cuba, he goes, yes, there is torture in Cuba, and it's mainly in Guantanamo Bay. And of course, he's referring to the U.S. Secret prisons for alleged terrorists. So anyhow, there's a long tradition of the U.S. presuming a right to get involved in Cuba. Okay, and here's a map of Latin America, and it's just a discussion of major export products. We're talking about copper, coffee, cacao, beef, bananas, tin, a lot of different products coming out of Latin America that have been important to U.S. interests, in particular wealthy capitalists, people who have the means of production and which they can invest in this, and so forth. And so we're going to kind of talk about the two Latin Americas. I mean, you could really make this argument about the entire world, the two Americas, the two whatever. You have people coming from Latin America who live quite affluently, quite nice, just like this. And then you have a lot of people, maybe the majority, living like this. And, just something to think about for every country. The perspective that you're going to have, the politics that people are going to have, may be different based on whether you're living in this kind of arrangement or this one, right? And really, this isn't just in Latin America where we see this kind of extreme disparity of wealth. But it did affect the politics, and it always affects the politics, especially when the majority are living in poverty. So, having said that, actually, I'm going to go back. I'm going to stop there, and then we're going to go to the next set of lectures.